interesting efforts that were undertaken in the openEHR space in the last 2-3 years. Very happy to have Birger here. And Birger, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, we're going back to the university hospitals, and as you can tell from my accent, we are going to Germany. And we started the journey for open platforms around 2015, working for Hannover Medical School as a computer scientist / software architect. All right, so in 2015, the German government came up with the idea that the data that's being produced inside the university hospitals could be used for knowledge gaining, for research. The problem is, however, it's not reality, and there is little exchange between the routine data on the one hand side towards research, but the translation from the research data back to the clinical practice is also quite limited. And so the goal was to set up an environment, an infrastructure to facilitate this exchange of the information. And in short, it's about establishing a secondary use network across the university hospitals. I'm a representative of the HiGHmed consortium, and a total of 4 consortia was created, or at least successfully applied for the funding. There was initially, I think, 8 consortia, and we are combining 10 university hospitals, several academic partners, and industry partners. We got around 50 million euro funding for around 5 years, and we have 3 use cases that were defined with the clinical stakeholders in oncology, cardiology, and infection control. So we interpreted the whole challenge as something that we call learning healthcare system. So we want to enhance practice-based evidence and evidence-based practice, and this needs to be combined. So, and how hard can this be? Quite easy, right? It's already done with electronic health records. So let's take a look at the healthcare landscape. Should be the same in the Netherlands. We have the GPs, we have the university hospitals with hospital information systems, and we have pharmacies, the patient themselves. But as we are in university hospitals, let's take a closer look. This is the bird's eye view on Hannover Medical School. Lovely. This is the bird's eye view on our information system. Maybe lovely, not sure. And so let's dive into one of these systems. It's just a placeholder screenshot, but you know these kind of systems. So from the ICU, lots of different parameters, and 100% vendor dependent. So these systems have a database, which looks like this. And typically you have some dynamic parameters in the database. And this is one excerpt of the list that we find in one of our systems. And we have some good candidates for the blood pressure. And so if we want to get some of the data, we have to figure out, okay, which is the right one. Okay, then sometimes we don't have any interfaces to the system, so we need to build our own, go to the database and figure out what's the correct query. Typically, we have only 1 or 2 people in the hospital who know about that. So the bus factor is quite concerning in this regard. And of course, if we want to get the holistic view on the patient, we have to go to multiple systems to get all the blood pressures in the emergency department, ICU, and so on. And then we have lots of systems that are not officially managed. We have Excel tables, Access databases. It's running on the local computer inside the departments, and this data is not accessible. So now if we want to use this data across all the university hospitals, we have not one problem, but we have this problem manifold, and it just doesn't scale, it doesn't work. So we did 5 years of data warehousing at Hannover Medical School. This was hard. Doing this course at enterprise, it's really, really hard. Super expensive and not sustainable. So we came to the conclusion, if we want to have such a network and a healthcare system, it doesn't work with our concurrent architecture. It's a non-starter, it's not going to be sustainable. So we have lack of standardization, lots of data silos. Yeah, it's not part of the architecture. So what do? We came up with the idea of building a platform and setting this along the research systems and our care provision systems. With the two goals, on one hand side, integrate the data, and then use the data to build new application systems on top to provide added value for researchers and also for the care providers. And this in accordance to the FAIR principles, which means it should be interoperable. So a review on how this might look like. You have to know this platform is installed in every single university hospital that's participating. So we are taking a look at one. On the bottom, you have the existing systems on the care domain, and then on the right-hand side for the research domain. Means our legacy systems plus a communication server might have some file interfaces, might have some H7 version 2 interfaces. And then we are building this platform alongside both domains. And this is really important that it's not put into the research and it's like a data warehouse. No, it needs to be available at the point of care. And we have different standards that fulfilling different, let's say, responsibilities in the system. You can see lots of IHE, but then we have the openEHR clinical data repository, but then also things like a fire terminology service. So setting in a platform is not enough. There needs to be governance, there needs to be standardization, and this starts with joint information governance across the hospitals. It is quite tough because before the initiative, we didn't even have things like a local data dictionary, but then we start right away with a distributed and shared data dictionary. So this is what you see here with the data dictionary and with terminologies that needs to be managed. So we defined a role called data stewards, which are responsible for implementing the standards and developing the standards together with the departments. We wrote a user manual, like 25 pages, did some publications and thought about, okay, how can a national governance structure look like? That's based on the Archetypes approach from openEHR. So we got our own clinical knowledge manager, where we jointly work on the standardization and provision of the openEHR archetypes and templates. Oops. And so we had many people working in this project, many data stewards, data scientists, and there's also Ian providing training and Silje from Norway, from National IKT back then. So some statistics in our clinical knowledge manager, we have 170 users, 90 in the role of a reviewer. We have a total of 123 archetypes that are actively used. And we have around 118 templates that are used in our use cases. And we have been really busy doing the reviewing and controlling. The important number is what you find here on the right-hand side, total almost 3,000 reviews of archetypes, templates, and the translations from the international CKM. And this is, I think, quite good numbers, but we invested quite a lot in manpower and womenpower to get this going with the data stewards. Then we have our terminology service based on HiGHmed Fire. So we have Onto server, I think, which is also used in MICTIS in the Netherlands, also in the UK. And Snowball CT's leading terminology, and this needs to be combined with openEHR, with the archetypes and templates. And this is fully integrated in our data repository, but also in the knowledge management tool. So as an example, we have a microbiology template, and on the top here you can see a binding to Snowball CT, and this is dynamically loaded into the data model. You can click here, and then you're getting the list of all the 600 something entries of the microbiology agents that can be put into this data field. And so this really eases the pain of doing the management of data models and the terminologies. Then, of course, we want to integrate data from existing systems and build applications on top. And this is what I will show you here. We have multiple approaches how we can do this. So sometimes we just have the data sources as they are because we don't have any influence. And this is so and so, might work, might not work, because you don't have control over data quality and a degree of standardization. Then the second one is that you can use the openEHR standard and then derive a vendor-specific form. And I will show an example how we do this in HiGHmed from Cerner. And this works okay-ish. That's good. And then enlightenment, so it's native openEHR app, which avoids you putting any ETL process in. You're not spending time and effort on data integration, but on building the application that you can put here. Okay. So this is what we really like. So one example from our infection control use case, and this is mainly data coming in from sources as they are, laboratory information systems and SAP for the patient movement data. It's about nosocomial infections and about these chains inside the hospital, so that we can find the points of transmission, or these potential points of transmission, where the patients have maybe got the nosocomial infection. So we are through the ETL and then putting us all in the openEHR repository, and the application Smart Infection Control is getting the data using the Archetype query language and then doing the crunching and doing the visualization, and it's a .NET application. And yeah, we recently extended this one for COVID-19. So for the oncology use case, we had the requirement for structured data for the discharge of the patient. And we came up with the template, and the clinicians really wanted to use their SAP forms because it's established in the workflow. And so my colleagues built this form in accordance with the template, getting the XML export, and then right away, once the data is stored, importing into the openEHR CDR. So this is a high-level view on the template use. So we have body weight, pain scale, ECOG performance status, Cardiology index. I think this was mentioned today, actually. And yeah, then this is being put into the SAP, and data is entered and then being translated back. But it's the same data model, basically. So, and then for cardiology, we had the luxury of a greenfield. We had only paper processing. We thought, okay, let's digitize it in the correct way right away. And we built the archetypes and templates, and yeah, created an application that's running natively on the openEHR repository. So it's running on a mobile device, and so far we have used this for documentation of 1,100 heart failure patients. So the data can be used right away for the care provision, but also for the clinical registry that's being fed as part of the use case. So it's going to be extended for physical examination. And this is how it looks like. So we have the patient choice, and you see a timeline of the patient. So it's also doing some reads on the repository to see what's already inside. Then you have a barcode scanner to get the right patient context, the patient demographics. And then it's a typical form that you can easily fill in. And we are working right now that the patients can also provide some of the data, and then the physician can control and sign and say, okay, this is the correct data. Okay, so based on the platform approach in HiGHmed, we also had some more projects that are relying on this. And I will show you this one. This is the EHRbase, which was mentioned once or twice. So this was created in collaboration with the industry partner Vitagroup. And we thought, okay, if it's an open standard, somewhat it needs an open source implementation. Also, we need a reference implementation because we wanted to advance things like the query language for more analytical use cases, as an example. And also we worked on this integration with the FHIR terminology service and did the reference implementation in EHRbase first. As you can see, it's already used in 2 national projects in Scotland, and it's going to be used in Jamaica. And there's a big cancer network in India using it. And Karolinska, I think they have been playing around with it. I'm not sure about the status, but I thought it's worth mentioning here. Maybe Eric can tell in the next session, sorry, in the next presentation, what's the current status. So then we have one project, and I think this would be worth a presentation itself. It's the German COVID-19 data platform. And yeah, it has to go to aggregate routine care data for the COVID-19 patients from basically all university hospitals. We got additional funding when COVID started in 2020. And yeah, the first phase is running out this year, but there's the runtime until 2024. This has already been approved, and yeah, we applied together with all university hospitals with this open platform concept. Yeah, so that we have the FAIR principles respected, and also we use the technology that was already developed to have a short time to market. Yeah, so it uses EHRbase, it uses the onto server connectivity, What has been developed is the so-called GECKO data set, which is the FHIR data set for the COVID-19 related data. This can be imported. Then we have, oh, this is nice, one interface. And we provide, as part of the COVID-19 platform, this self-service. So on the left-hand side, you can pick the criteria and then start building your cohort as a researcher so that you can apply for a research project and say, look, I need patients with the following demographics. They should have the following, for example, vaccination status, for the discharge status. So we are interested in patients that are deceased or went to palliative care. Then we might be interested if they have been on the intensive care unit and maybe also adding the smoker status. And what's pretty nice about it, you only upload the archetypes and templates, and then it's completely no code. You can directly start using the criteria or building new criteria, and so it's quite flexible in addressing anything. So it's open source, and you can use it basically also for oncology or cardiology mixture. So it's really agnostic on, let's say, the indication. And then you can do this button editing, which will give you the number of patients that are matched in this cohort. And then there's also a whole process where you can apply for the data and then get the source data. So you can load into your Excel table and your SAS into the analytics on the data. Okay, then finally, last thing I want to show you is the research network CaEHR. And this brings us back to this whole thing regarding the patient journey and care coordination. So we are not only in the university hospitals. So this is another funding scheme from the German government. So based on the results of HiGHmed and the Medical Informatics Initiative, that the results are disseminated into the the different sectors in healthcare. And in this case, it's about cardiovascular diseases. And we are providing the data from our data integration centers and our hospital platform as sort of a portal to the GPs and also the rehabilitation centers, so that they can easily access the data and also provide new data. And so we have seamless exchange of information between these providers as well. So this is funding with 10 million euros. We have 4 partners from HiGHmed participating. There's also some more use cases regarding emergency care involved. But we are mainly concerned right now with the rehabilitation centers. They are getting collected and we can ensure the correct aftercare. And then some takeaways and summaries. So now it has been like a 7-year journey for us. Quite exhausting, quite exciting, I have to say. But what we learned is that many of our considerations that we had before starting the project, I think they turned out to be true. So for example, if you have data quality and analytics as an afterthought, forget about it. It's not going to work. You have to really take care of the whole data lifecycle. You need full control of your hospital information system. Otherwise, it's not going to fly. Okay, then you need, but this is maybe quite similar, this needs to be integrated in care. And also, I think from the sustainability perspective, in the end, you don't want to rely on project budget from the government. It needs to be part of your routine budget for hospital information systems. Otherwise, after 5 to 10 years, you might run out of steam and money. So what's nice to see is that, of course, we had to integrate some data within ETL processes, but as you've seen with some of our applications, we shifted away our budget from integration costs to creation costs. And this is always much more satisfying if you have a new application that's really fit for purpose, what you try to achieve. And you don't have to fiddle with all the insufficiencies of your existing systems. That's not the fun part, building new stuff. From my perspective, it's way cheaper and brings you there more easily. So in this sense, it's maybe a half statement, but maybe we have to throw away the last 30 years of effort and build something new iteratively, at least. Yeah, open source I think is quite important. So we see some nice collaborations and uptake around this. So making the platform easily available is part of the story. And now there are, and I will say the name, there are good companies like InterSystems. They have good platforms, but it's highly proprietary. And so once you are purchasing, you're locked in and you're not gonna get out. So I think it's really good to have open standards and then choose the vendor. And it's okay that they want to have money, that's for sure. But yeah, you shouldn't be taken hostage and your data by the vendors. What I can also say is the reuse of archetypes save lots of resources. Not saying there's not much work to be done, but we have been able to use like 60 to 70% of international archetypes, which I think is quite good because especially with oncology and cardiology, we are going quite deep into the domain. Can take a look at the archetypes. I think it's well advanced what we had to add, but now I think it's quite nice, and already people start, let's say, to put this back into the international space and also adapting for their projects internationally. What also shouldn't be underestimated is the education of your working staff, working with standards, maybe CDA, SNOMED, LOINC, openEHR, FIRE, whatever. It's a complex domain, and your IT department needs to know about these kind of things. And typically, you will have to spend money on educate people or setting up education programs. Talking to the universities, I mean, we have been able to find people, but it's surely a ramp-up phase and shouldn't be underestimated. So there's not much workforce out there that can do these kind of things. Take some time. So finally, so we submitted our application for the next funding phase, 4 more years, hopefully, keep fingers crossed. Now CODEX is going to run until the end of 2023 and the CaEHR even a bit longer. And so I think what my good hope is that there will be more projects, and actually there are more projects I haven't had the time to tell you about. But of course, there might be some good networking effects. We are also having already good collaboration with Karolinska, for example, and other partners who are joining the open platform journey. Yeah, this is what I wanted to talk about today. Thanks for your attention and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, and I must say, 15 minutes, very good. Questions? Well, all the way back again, first one.
Thank you very much. Impressive results. Where would you see the most impact created? Is that in the projects that combine data across multiple institutes, or is it helping applications and developers to deploy their applications more easily across the institutes? So where do you see the most benefit?
Yeah, I think so far it's about the easy deployment. So the smart infection control system in the future hopefully will have some sort of distributed machine learning approach. So it's improving, but it's tough because it's sometimes hard medical informatics challenges. As an example, we have the use case oncology, and we want to have something like search for similar patients based on the genomic data and other, let's say, treatment data and the outcome. And it's nice that you have this ambition, but when we started, and especially oncology was not that structured and digitized and standardized. So we spent lots of time and lots of resources on the modeling, and also then, as you've seen with the oncology discharge letter, improving the systems, but it's lots of fundamental work that has to be done until you can really start with interesting stuff, and then you can ask, okay, what's a similar patient? But of course, we are all with university hospitals and medical informatics departments, so we like to do the cutting edge stuff. And sometimes it's working, sometimes it takes a bit longer. So I would say the bread and butter topics are a bit more, let's say, realistic in the beginning.
Yes. Yeah, thank you also for the presentation. My question, I revealed I have complete, did not understand the whole base. I have no clue of the charge, but I still saw that. In fact, it showed that you did your own archetypes for your project. Yeah, it shows on the screen. What's the chance of you doing the same thing in letters? You come to the same archetype that which they think on. So just by governance of the openEHR framework, so that people talk themselves and learn and become the same thing, or does the model somehow always come to the same output?
I mean, this would be a nice experiment if you are putting 20 physicians in a room and then 3 rooms with 20 physicians and then see what's the outcome, right?
It's exactly trying to say so. If you want to go to the same data vaults everywhere, so did you? Now I'm going to be very blunt. Did you create another proprietary data scheme at a larger scale, or did you really solve a data problem by describing a common data element that is used worldwide?
And what I can tell you is at least we start with a specific, let's say, use case when we thought about the archetype modeling, but it's really considering, okay, what is interesting about this particular clinical concept. And I'm not saying that we catch all, let's say, scenarios that might be relevant, but at least we have this philosophy. And then, of course, there's international collaboration. But we also have to say sometimes it's a mixture of, okay, this is well established, has gone through all the reviews and can be reused. And again, we have 60 to 70% reuse rate from international space. But then for the last 30%, yeah, it's about, okay, how can we get some agreement? And then sometimes is it really practical and is it worth the standardization? I mean, we have an interesting, for example, and I think hopefully Voter is not, how to say, is not mad about it, but we had a discussion with our nephrology use case, which was another side project. So do we need to standardize internationally the Eurotransplant waiting list? And he might say, yes, you should. And others might say, no, it's okay for the use case because there's not much value in having this interoperable. Yeah? So it's always this kind of decision, but I think for, let's say, the official scales and for the bigger topics like TNM classification and so on, I think we are quite close. And it's an ongoing process, as mentioned, to get this bottom up to the international level.
Thank you very much.
One question from Yeah, actually, I'm not mad. we need to also establish some standards here still, so we'll get to a standard at some point.
Nice to see you, Birger. My name is Felix. Question. Based on your experiences in Germany, that many hospitals, what could we learn from that, specifically in the Netherlands?
I think this could be a really long article about the lessons learned.
Please.
I mean, let's do one, the biggest lesson learned. I think we can have a conversation afterwards, and I think there will be later in time a summary. But what I can tell is that it's advantages if you're not starting with too many stakeholders, and you have some sense of, let's say, ambition for the goal and for the quality, and some people that are really willing to do the change. And I think this is funny because when you're on LinkedIn, everybody's like, yeah, we're doing digitalization, yeah, we're doing things differently, and everybody who's doing disruption is getting the praise. And then you're hitting, let's say, reality of the hospitals, and people are not so enthusiastic about it. And I mean, it's clear because we are not having that much budget, there is the legacy systems around. And so when you come there as an academic and you say, oh, you have to change things, it's like, oh, you are young, you don't have a clue. It's not going to work, this is not the reality. And so I think it's better to start small, also with some defined use cases, show the added value, but from the, let's say, architecture point of view, don't make a compromise early on. This is so important because otherwise it's many people say, okay, let's stay pragmatic and please don't get over your head, and the whole industry, well, not the whole, but many industry cases, at least in the German market, when you have a company like configurable medical, it's like really the prototype of a company that doesn't want sharing data. From my point of view, we worked for like 4 years, and at least back then it was the policy in the company. And so I think you will also have to get some resistance from people who might not be so happy. But it's just what you have to go through. I think this is not maybe a good summary, but at least some points.
It's a lottery.
You wanted to say something?
Just very briefly.
Well,
Yeah.
so we'll round up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just say that's a really great question from the back. Are we just creating more, little local archetypes? We probably are for a while. So I say to people, the way we do things in openEHR is really bad, but it's way better than almost anyone else does it. Because you've got to get through the requirements. You've got to understand what German oncologists do and need to report. And very often that's driven by German reporting mechanisms. We've got sort of the same questions in the UK, but they're a little bit different. And we're just going to let this work out, and we can only do it by doing a little bit of work, getting it wrong quite a few times before we get it right, and bubbling up that useful work in localities and regions and national level, and then it bubbles up. As long as we have the communication mechanism.
So maybe
It's a long, slow slog, but we're on the right.
But what you shouldn't do is really start with reporting requirements. I think this is really the wrong end to start with. It's really more about what the clinician wants to know and not what someone else might not know in the future, right?
I agree.
Oh my God, there's two more questions. I'll allow two very short ones.
I just want to say this. My question is a little bit provocative, because I understand we had a discussion this morning about open services, fire, not being very consistent and accessibility, the profiling. In essence, the national archetypes are also something like a local profile. So in that sense, I think reality is that there's always difference.
Yeah, but don't forget, there's one common stable reference model on persistency level, and I think everybody's ignoring, some people are ignoring that fact. It's a key differentiator. So the archetype work is rough work. Getting consensus with clinicians is not easy. And it has flavors in countries. But if you leverage from a very rich maximum data set that's already there, based on a reference model that has been robust for over 10 years, that's a very good starting point. And touching the use cases they're doing, they are deep in oncology, not a bit in oncology. There's a gene professor working on these archetypes. So they do very detailed, very complex stuff. So it's not a wonder that they can't reach the 100%, but 60-70% is way better than any other stuff.
One more question, right?
I'll actually just comment and add to what Eric just explained. I come from Better, we're the industry partner, and we've developed quite a lot of field applications along the EHR as well. And we came across this challenge of what you asked, because we started to help VM with one version of the archetypes, which obviously evolved during time. We actually were lacking this stuff with doing the medication management, the easy domain. And we started with one version, and then UK came up with another version, and we worked with the third version. But what was really nice is that for us as a vendor, because from the start, the models were done by clinicians. So although the first version that we did was different than what UK did and then what EM evolved from all the different versions, the core concepts were still there. Maybe they ended up in a different brand within the archetype, or they got renamed, and some maybe got split into two, but the changes were not really great. So for us as an industry partner, developing the software, doing a migration from one version of an archetype to another one, the third one was relatively easy. And the migration stayed at the level of you map from one data point in this tree structure to another data point to another tree structure, or you split one field into two fields and a bit different terminology. So this is easy work. It was not conceptually completely different. And we know how it is. Software evolves, data points evolve. But if you have this common sense and two groups of experts in one room and another room, because they're experts in the same field, they're going to come to very similar conclusions, a little bit different maybe in the structure, but the concepts are going to be there. And that's why it's really powerful also from the industry perspective. And we need to evolve. We'll never get to a point, well, I guess not. We're humans, we're driving forward, but this can give you this sort of flexibility. So that's why that's the industry perspective. So.
And with that, Birger, thank you. Thank you very much.